Okay. All right. Go for it, Andrew.
Wonderful. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for twisting my arm and convincing me that people wanted to hear what I might have to say. Um, most of this is going to be anecdotes. Most of it is the perspective of somebody who does a lot of listening and a lot of research, but is not the final word on any of this. So I hope that people will make note of where they disagree and we can chat about it at the end and maybe I can learn from you. So I recruit tech writers. I recruit tech writers primarily for the software industry and within the software industry, primarily for startups. Not necessarily because I love startups, it's because startups are the only ones who love me. Um, and I have some perspectives on what the pandemic has done to us that I'd like to discuss this evening. And I will go ahead and do that starting now. I guess our being recorded message go away. In an attempt to organize my thoughts, here's my agenda. I won't read it out loud. I will just jump in to what the pandemic changed about our world. So work from home, very much the norm now, and many tech writers read the writing on the wall, said, I've been dreaming of this day, and they moved away. They figured Bay Area prices and tech writing compensation, there had to be a more synergistic, if you will, mix. So they are now doing what they did at Bay Area prices from far away. During the initial years of the boom of the COVID pandemic, tech writing hiring boomed in sync with online demand. And it has subsequently shrunk as online demand has perhaps gotten more realistic or perhaps shrunk a bit. While that happened, pay rates spiked, but so did expectations. Expectations for the people they hired became wildly optimistic. And people were being asked essentially to be engineers who wrote. They were asked to wear multiple hats. They were asked to do 3 or 4 jobs rolled into one at the same pay rates. It was, well, as from this recruiter's point of view, very unrealistic and almost insane. Those few who were unemployed during that time, I will go so far as to say they got lazy. They didn't have to keep up. They didn't have to show up. They had government subsidies and they, if they could live on those, did so. And that caused a lot of frustration when those subsidies went away. The working tech writer population got greedy during the same time. They basically said, 150 is no longer enough. I want 170 because I heard of a friend getting 170. He looked at past notes on from 4 years ago and saw that I had written baseline pay for a salary tech writer in the Bay Area is 100K. And that was true then. And it's gone up substantially since. Some tech writers, some tech workers worked 2 jobs to take advantage of the fact that they didn't have to show up in person at either. And that was good while they lasted and while it lasted and while they lasted before they burned out. And then this concept called resume harvesting shows up. Now, resume harvesting is my term for send us your resume and don't expect a response. We'll stick it in our database. We will run it through our applicant tracking system, maybe, and we'll call you if we feel like it. Basically, they were doing analytics on the kinds of resumes they could get. They were asking people what they cost, which is a question that you should never really answer. And it all got very frustrating for the black hole effect of, I was perfect for that job and nobody contacted me and it's been weeks, or somebody sent me email saying, thank you, we'll be in touch, and never were. So that's the world of resume harvesting, and it has gotten to be the norm since then. I think that 2023 has brought right sizing with the advent of increased inflation, with the advent of increased, shall we say, recession fears and fearfulness overall. Right sizing is what they're calling trimming the excess workforce to coincide with demand. Typically, at tech companies, that has resulted in at least 10% workforce reductions, and in the tech comm world, it's closer to 30%. There are an awful lot of unemployed tech writers out there, and a lot more who are keeping their heads down, not drawing attention to themselves. And all that's happened while a lot of fixed costs were cut. Essentially, this is the contraction version of our boom bust tech cycle. The hybrid world is still, hybrid work is still the exception. Nobody is demanding that people show up on site unless you work for C3 AI. And there are very few companies there say, thou shalt dress for the occasion. People have gotten used to working in their pajamas and, frankly, not having to be more than the face on a Zoom screen. Tech industry rates have softened a lot. They have gone down probably 25%, and the hiring managers are making it look like you should be grateful for that, which is really hard to swallow. I advise not being grateful for it, but also not being surprised. Tech jobs now have to advertise, by law, they have to advertise their intended compensation or compensation range. I recommend you don't trust what's posted, because some of those numbers are six figures beginning with 2 or 3. It's been a very, very long time since I've seen somebody start a job for $200,000.
Well, isn't there a California requirement now that they have to post the range of
Yes,
possible
range? That's what number 4 says. They have to specify the range, but it doesn't have to be truthful.
Yeah.
So I had many candidates bring to my attention jobs that start at 350K for tech writing. Sorry, that's not real. Maybe that was an oversight. Maybe someone was trying to hire an engineer and just use the same template to hire a tech writer. But please don't let that get you too excited. It's largely bluff. Back to resume harvesting. Responses are rare. Interviews are rarer. I looked that word up. It does exist. And actual hiring is the rarest of these 3. In-house recruiters are now also rare. They have been laid off as surplus to the needs of companies that are no longer growing. As a result, hiring managers have neither the time nor the budget to identify and vet talent. And even if they could, they're having to satisfy competing, and I would say conflicted, agendas. That's why you see so many jobs for engineers who can write. There are a few of them out there, but most people want to do one and not the other, and want to be paid accordingly. So, this job market. So the economy has changed, you've noticed, I hope. Interest rates have doubled in the past 12 to 18 months. New debt, which is tech's lifeblood, is very expensive. That is very damaging to the growth prospects of startups. Everyone's saying recession is here, or recession is around the corner, or lots of reasons to be fearful. Unfortunately, the stock market doesn't agree. The stock market has gone up 20% since its low in October of last year. Tech has led the way. When the stock market goes up, engineering hiring follows. and about 6 months later, tech writing hiring follows. So there are reasons to be optimistic, but also reasons to stay patient. I think asking for tomorrow's pay rate today will get you a surprised look and short conversation. There are plenty of job postings out there, but the hiring teams, they're almost universally, they're fearful, they're indecisive, they're slow, and they're consensus driven. So very little tech comm hiring is getting done. Now, I'm on LinkedIn every day. I watch people saying, I'm delighted to join this company. I'll start tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. I'd love to ask half of those people, how long did it take you to find that job? How many interviews? What is the process? A 3-month process or a 3-week process? Much more likely it was closer to 3 months. In the midst of all this, a lot of veteran technical writers have exited the market or retired, just given up, moved away, figured they've had their field day, their heyday, and it's no longer interesting, it's no longer fun, they're gone. That leaves an awful lot of talent in demand, but unsatisfied. There's an appetite that is unsatisfied. In particular, startups are under their VCs, venture capitalists' orders to conserve cash, to extend their runway, so to speak. And public companies are doing riffs just to impress Wall Street. So as a result, technical communicators who have never been the first to get hired and are often the first to be laid off are pretty much all in jeopardy. They may not know it yet, but they are. And it's an uncertain time, not much fun out there. So I'm going to characterize the dilemmas. This is a multi-page list. A lot of talent is unemployed or underemployed, and globalization is pretty much completely to blame for this. Inflation helps, but companies who can pay US wages are holding on to their talent as much as they can when they can afford to. Companies that have gone global, where doc is done offshore, those people, the technical writers who are in the US are scared, and the tech writers on the coasts, where it's more expensive to live, are scareder. So they're underemployed or they're unemployed, and they're hunting. They know what the future looks like. Locals can no longer command top dollar. That's partly because they require more money to live, and also because hiring managers don't care about longevity anymore. They don't care about the fact that you've been in this business 20, 30 plus years. They care what you know about their subject material and what you know about their audience. Tools, much less so. Years in the trenches, not at all. So if you can say, gee, I used FrameMaker, gee, I used, fill in the blank, use VI, use awk to do my documentation, they don't care. In fact, that makes them feel like you know that you've been through more than they have, and they get threatened. Finally, if you're in the Bay Area in particular, or if you're on the coasts and people ask for hybrid work opportunities, technical writers locally can compete, can accept those options, but most don't want it. I don't think there are too many who say, I will only apply to an on-site job. There are a few, I know some of them, but very few. And most they don't dream about the commute. They don't dream about working at picnic tables in open plan offices. So it's not, they're going to have to be patient before things get aligned with their needs. Dilemmas Part 2. In case you care, recruiters also have a dilemma. Most recruiters, as I mentioned earlier, got riffed because companies are no longer growing. Tech company CFOs will not, over their dead bodies, recruit or approve budgets for third-party recruiters like yours truly, especially if they're sourcing non-engineering talent. So these days, I don't even ask. I hope for the best. If somebody asks for my help in identifying talent, I volunteer names, but I don't expect to get paid. I heard when they do have a budget. As mentioned earlier, TechComm hiring picks up on average 6 months after the engineers get their kind of your hired calls, but that hasn't really begun yet. So patience, please. And then what can Synergistic do for you? I have a slide on that later, but I can facilitate via LinkedIn introductions. I can advise for free. There's a link to my calendar at the end of this presentation. And I'm pretty good at making pro bono introductions to people who have similar backgrounds or have similar or have relevant needs. And again, those don't cost, but they often result in quality conversations, good connections, and opportunities. So I do that because it keeps me relevant, and I like staying relevant. So into the job search challenges part, and this is going to be a list that probably won't surprise anybody at all, but I'm going to turn it, I'm going to go, my next slide or set of slides will be on success tips. So hold your breath. Black hole resume submissions, as I mentioned earlier, they're the norm. Very few recs are actually funded. They are fishing expeditions is the best, most polite way I can explain it. They're looking for people who might have the skills that might justify allocating a budget. TechComm hiring is low priority. According to the chief financial officer and the chief technology officer, they would prefer to hire an engineer and make that engineer write the doc if they'll agree, if they're sufficiently desperate. Most job descriptions are kitchen sinks. They are amalgamations of different teams' requirements. And some, I hesitate to say it, but it's true, they are generic. They bear little resemblance to a company's actual needs. It's some HR person looking at a catalog of past job descriptions and reposting it. And there are actually publications with standard job descriptions. You can tell them they're on the job boards, basically asking for unquantifiable, vapid, basically skills that everyone can claim but nobody can prove. Finally, there's that kind of shadow over all of us in the AI world, ChatGPT and large language models and their like. A lot of companies are investing hoping that it will reduce the need for homegrown content. That is their interest. They do not want to spend more money on content if they can avoid it. And they think they'll save money by introducing chatbots and AI tools. So I think they're wrong because AI has a habit of hallucinating, among other reasons, but the investments happen. And it's a no-brainer for a CFO to put a chatbot, at the front end to their doc set. It just might not make their customers that happy. All right. So how do we succeed? There is no perfect solution. I do not have the touchstone for what should happen to get yourself employed. What I can tell you is if you are going to apply quickly. Job posts oversubscribe pretty fast. And if you have a LinkedIn premium subscription, you can see just how fast. I would suggest that if you can tell that a job has received 100 applicants or more, it's too late. Unless you are a stellar fit, probably not going to fit. Understand that your odds are better if you work around the applicant tracking system, if you work around HR, if there are HR in-house recruiters, if you work around them. The solution is to find insider connections, peers, ideally. You don't have to work there anymore, but they could have worked there in the past. That's just fine. They were your source to person making hiring decisions. Once that person is convinced, the others very often fall in line more readily. It's not easy, but it's more likely. How do you do that? If you can't, look at your LinkedIn network and say, oh, I know somebody there today, you can expand and then leverage your network on LinkedIn. It's essential. Ultimately, we are all part of a diaspora from COVID. And if you don't track where people land and you don't leverage their experience, you are the poorer for it, sometimes literally. Next, I would say be selective about where you apply, because tech companies care a lot more about your subject matter background, subject matter understanding, audience awareness, than they do about your tech writing chops. Tech writing is something they mistakenly believe anyone can do. Understanding their product, not so much. So I recommend parroting keywords from the posting. SEO, search engine optimize your resume. It's almost essential to not make your audience think. If you can give them terms from their own job description that they can search for, your resume is going to get found magically more readily. Next, be skeptical. Your unfunded listings, like I indicated earlier, they're very common. If it looks too good to be true, apply, maybe, but don't hold your breath. It may be that that job was never funded. It may be that that place is nothing like the way it promises to be, either on Glassdoor or LinkedIn or in the eyes of peers who might have worked there once. Don't expect replies. People are legally motivated not to tell you anything about how your candidacy is faring. It is dangerous and is construed as libelous in some cases to say, oh, well, we thought you were X, and that's why we didn't pursue. So you're not going to hear that from HR. You're not going to hear that from hiring managers. You might hear it from peers who were on the team or happen to have heard through the grapevine what happened. It's not the norm. Remember that the job market, although it is weak, is cyclical. It is not your punishment for getting greedy. It is not your punishment for being long in the tooth. It is cyclical, and your day will return, and prices will rise, and you will have leverage again. Do not blame yourself, please. This is not your fault. We live in a high-stakes game. We play a high-stakes game of boom and bust. This is the bust, but it's nowhere near as bad as 2001 or 2008 or even 2020 initially. So there's cause for optimism there, even though it still hurts. If you are jobless and you are financially at risk, I recommend considering, that is, if you're not getting traction with places you've applied, consider accepting anything that pays the bills. You do not have to put it on your resume. You do not have to explain in detail what you did during that time. You can say, oh, I was learning the next hot skill. I was learning how to tame ChatGPT. I was learning how to tame Git. I was learning how to do docs as code. It doesn't have to be the truth. You might have worked for a florist, but if that made you happy and that paid the bills and kept you sane, do it, because we want you here for the long term. Next, tech writers trend older. They're not typical 30-year-old um, tech worker. If you plan to retire in the next 5 years, consider other non-geeky roles. I've spoken to a lot of tired tech writers over the years, and they have learned to love corresponding jobs in pharma and banks and insurance companies, in healthcare, in government and utilities. Just understand that they cannot go back to software or hardware. That's a one-way door. If you are not planning to retire within 5 years, keep learning. If you are not familiar yet, as in able to be productive with a DocSys code toolchain, with Python scripting, with Git for all its uses, not able to create API doc or the basics, if you are not familiar with what AI can do, it might make your job either temporary or history. You should get in there and figure it out, because somebody else will. Somebody else will likely be a bean counter who says, why do we hire you? And finally, and I say this somewhat tongue in cheek, it is not too late to move away. A lot of people solve the problem of, I can't keep a job in the Bay Area and pay the bills with getting out of town. And they live a more stress-free existence, not totally stress-free, but more stress-free, by working from New Mexico or Arizona or North Dakota, whatever makes you happy. Some have gone south of the border. I could introduce you to a number of tech writers who are living in Mexico and having the time of their lives and not in any way impeded in their job search. So I will wrap up now and say, here's how I can help. And I want to hear what's working for you. So please contribute. Tell me what you're seeing, hearing, feeling, because I can I can certainly sympathize, and I may be able to assist. Hello. Okay. Nikki's
We're still here,
but she's clapping.
Well, I have a problem in my resume in that during most of the COVID pandemic, I didn't really do anything that you would normally put on a resume.
Okay.
I've been working on a newsletter for a fiddle club. I've been writing a book on music theory. I've been dabbling in this and that, but I haven't had any normal kinds of jobs.
Okay.
And that the recruiters go, oh, so were you in jail? What's this about?
Now you can generalize it and anonymize it a little bit. You can say that you pursued various educational programs and projects without being too specific, and anything to show that you weren't vegetating, you were actually doing stuff.
I think writing a book on music theory is pretty close to what we do.
I think that would
Agreed.
impress a lot of recruiters, actually. A lot of musicians end up in tech writing and at the technical end of the tech writing spectrum. So if they know that, often works in your favor.
Well,
Yeah, agreed. I actually have bachelor's in music, and I always kind of perk up when we discuss that. So use your transferable skills.
Bravo. It's they are transferable skills and transferable mindsets, and there's a lot of pattern recognition and pattern matching that musicians need to do intuitively, and tech writers also need to do. Again, it's kind of a similar alchemy that they share. So I just, mean, when you're thinking, how do you explain what you did, quote, while not in tech or not writing documentation? Understand that if you contribute to your portfolio, or if you enhance your tech skills, even if you only did that, a couple hours a week or a couple hours a month, that still counts. And recruiters without imaginations will check the box and say, yeah, person is person is still legit, person is still a safe hire. And you don't have to tell them the truth about how long it took, but if you can show them something, they're likely to be very grateful. I think when all this comes out, there'll be a lot. When the initial hiring is done, the recruiters will come back and say, well, we can't find anyone who matches our job description. Who do you know who could effectively do this work? That's when a lot of people who've been sitting on the sidelines will find themselves in demand.
So I have a question, Andrew.
Yeah.
I have been um, thinking about my value proposition. I'm not a 20-something anymore, or even a 50-something. So I've been emphasizing the wisdom, the good judgment, the perspective that comes from a long technical career. And I'm just wondering if you think that actually is persuasive.
I think it's intimidating to most people who are hiring you, unless you're dealing with a very secure and trusting hiring manager. It's going to work against you. So I recommend abbreviating the resume. I recommend leading with the skills that they want and truncating the rest. And I recommend being grateful, or appearing or acting grateful when they tell you what they need. I think anybody who knows your history or has seen various versions of your resume over the years would say, how could we not want to hire this person? The only reason I can think not to hire Richard is he's fried, he's burned out. But you're not. So show them that you're not. Show them what current skills you have. There are a lot of burnouts amongst us, and their biggest danger for those people is to project entitlement. This has been a very humbling time, last year and a half or so, since COVID calmed down and hiring demand slowed down. I hope that's helpful.
Somebody's talking with mute on.
That is me. Sorry. I wanted to.
Sure.
Hi, Andrew. I wanted to throw in a couple of things I found out. And the first thing I want to say is the current market right now for tech writers, down as it is different than the downtime of 2001 and 2008. And what you said was very pertinent about, companies are looking for specific skills. And I want to add to that, just on the basis of some recent experience. Companies are getting inundated by lots of resumes, 200, 300 per opening. And what they're looking for is interest in the company. And, I've been guilty of this. I know probably others. You put your resume in and you think, oh, they'll look and they'll see that, you're interested in the company, but they want proof. And a good thing to do is for you to look at particular companies see what their product is, download it, play with it. If they have a conference on whatever their product is and you can get in for free, go to it. Show that you care about their company. And I've found that I get much more interest when I do that than, just doing a cold, and even a cover letter doesn't cut it. There is much more of a spark of interest when you can say, I'm applying at this gaming software company and I've, gone and used this particular game, or I've downloaded your, AI ops product and have played around with it. And I think these things are interesting and here's how I can help. I've found those things both if in just talking to a recruiter, I've gotten past, first base with them by showing that level of interest. So in the networking thing, I would add, go to the conferences where the engineers go and chat them up and get to know them and get to know their company. And then when it comes time to apply, you can say, oh, I know so-and-so and met them at this conference, and the company will say, oh, they've taken an interest and they've, they're really passionate about our product, our company, etc. So that's just something that is different that I'm seeing in this downturn as opposed to past downturns.
Much agree. Yes. Show them that you are engaged with their audience, with their product. Show some passion.
And it's hard when you're, getting turned down, or you're not finding what you're looking for, or getting lowballed, and to actually demonstrate that passion time and again. But it's really critical. And I'm seeing it as essential. And I've had recruiters tell me, well, somebody applied to this job and they don't even know what we do, and so I hear them. It's something they're looking for.
Well, this is something I've always done, but it's, as you say, if as the probability of getting any contact with somebody goes down, the amount you want to invest in that initial contact is less.
It's hard to invest a lot of time if you're going to have to put out dozens and dozens and dozens of applications.
Absolutely. And I wind up picking and choosing. I will throw out some applications and then pick the top 5 that I'm interested in and dig deeper into those and really put my energies. And then if something else, one of the other lesser applications comes through, then I'll dig into that company. So I do a kind of a hybrid approach.
So Cheryl, are you saying initial applications are kind of spontaneous, and then subsequent, like if they call back, you're prepared? Like you do the homework before they call?
Yes, it's a kind of a 3-tier solution. The lowest level is just blanket my resume in different places that are fit my criteria. They offer remote, they pay X amount, etc. And I put some level of attention to it, but it's more methodical and efficient than passionate. And then there are a smaller select group of companies that I'm really keen on. And I put more energy. I will go to a conference. I will, meet up with one of the engineers, read about or actually use the product. And those are the ones that I'm actually seeing get the recruiter excited about taking you to the next step.
It's also useful as a kind of self-defense. And that is that I mean, why you don't want to break your back trying to work for a company and then find out that you hate to be around the place.
Yeah.
Yes.
So find out a little bit about what they do. Am I going to be morally compromised working here?
Or even
Whatever. But
exactly.
keep your eyes open.
I looked at a company, and as I got farther into it, I got less interested in it. And then another company I got that seemed, uninteresting at first, I got really keen on. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
a great.
I know we had one of our members that joined up at Facebook and for a while. And anyway, she's not working there anymore. And I don't think she thought it was a good fit,
Exactly.
And the other thing I wanted to say is that part of the process is that people want to know, do you have the writing skills? Do you have the subject matter knowledge? And, are you going to be a pain in the ass to work with? And what's your personality like? And on a flip side of that is that you can emphasize some of the skills. I mean, it goes without knowing. I mean, if you're going to be a tech writer, you need the writing skills, but it's also useful, that, I mean, like some of us have been active in the SDC all these years and have done all kinds of teamwork kinds of stuff. And, I think that's valuable as well, and I wouldn't, while you were out not doing stuff, I would let people know that you stayed active in your professional association if you did.
And actually, I think that's a good point insofar as if you've been a lone wolf writer, but have been active in the STC, then saying I worked as a team on an STC project, and participated, that can show the teamwork aspect that so many companies are looking for.
And some of us with the recent consolidation at the chapters can even say that we, participated in keeping an organization alive,
Yeah.
and help with the reorganization after, a disorganization, whatever the term would be.
You built something from the ashes.
Yeah. You've built something, you've kept it active, and it's I mean, having survived this whole COVID business is
Non-trivial.
non-trivial, and you made it through it, and you're still going, and the organizations you belong to are still going, and and apparently growing. We got more people at this meeting than we had at our earlier meetings, and a lot of good things happening.
I attribute that to having Andrew as our speaker. But
Yeah. Well,
I'm blushing.
inviting Andrew to speak is always a good
right move. Yeah. Being able to work with a variety of people and encourage them and develop them and help work together with them. Yes, that is a worthwhile set of skills, and it's worth putting your ingenuity, putting some creativity into how you want to phrase that on your resume. That's worth bragging about. It is.
I just want to break in here for a second and talk about a movie. The reason that it's relevant. There was a movie a number of years ago, I think it was based on a real incident, about a kid that was trying to get into Harvard. And the backstory on the thing is his Harvard interview. And of course, Harvard's got more applicants than it can stand. And the interviewer tells me, tell me something that'll amaze me. And the guy proceeds to tell the story how he got recruited to be part of a group that was going out to Las Vegas and counting cards. And he'd made a fortune a couple of times and got lost and got caught in one thing and another. And they have this wild adventure. And of course the recruiter's just going bug-eyed at this thing. And But reason I'm telling it is the guy he asked the guy to sort of sum it up, and he says, "Well, I worked in a team. I learned new skills. I made a lot of money. I did this and that." He takes this stuff off, you know. And,
So Andrew, I have another question.
yeah.
Thank you, Patrick. That was good.
If you're on LinkedIn, you know, there's a basic service, and then there are all sorts of premium things you can pay for. And I just want to know your opinion. I know you probably pay for all of them. What's your opinion as to their value to job seekers?
I pay for as little as possible on LinkedIn, but I draw the line at making it possible for anyone to reach me, so they can connect with me, and I can send a near infinite number of in-mails. That means directed messages. Not that they get read nearly as often or taken as seriously as they used to, but for $1,700-$1,800 a year, it is a low investment for this recruiter to hear from people who might not have LinkedIn Premium subscriptions and say, you know, I want to reach this guy, but he doesn't have a premium account, and I don't either. Therefore, we can't connect. That makes my network effectively useless. So that's what I pay for. There are bells and whistles. LinkedIn Recruiter is its own product aimed at recruiters, and that costs 4 or 5 times as much for a 1-year subscription. I find it a toy, and it's just widely used by sourcing services south of the border and in East Asia. Basically, the people who are calling you 15 different companies like this are calling you within minutes of receiving a client's job description, telling you that you'd be perfect for it, and blowing smoke.
But I mean, from the standpoint of somebody who's looking for work,
as a candidate, you need a network, and you don't have to have a premium account. I don't know what it costs to put the flag saying I'm looking. I'm not sure it does. Do you know?
I don't know. I've started a trial one, but I haven't paid for it.
I pay $40 a month for LinkedIn Premium, but I like it because I take a lot of classes on LinkedIn. So it's $40 a month.
So that includes the classes. What I see from it is that it gives you more information about jobs you apply for and who the other applicants are. I mean, or statistical information about the other applicants.
Sure. I don't necessarily trust that information, but you're right. It gives you more stats, and that can help you not waste your time. I think the trick is to apply quickly, regardless of you watch it and you respond and say, okay, my resume is in contention, and it will be the speed with which you turn an application around counts. And that's really not up to the client. It's not even up to LinkedIn. It's all on you. I've seen stats of 500 people applied to this job, and I can tell you that at least in the early days of COVID, it was mostly because it was offsite, and people said, "Oh, I can do that from anywhere. Great, and I'll apply." Offsite was a rarity. Now it's the norm, and so that doesn't draw people as much. High prices do, but when a company as rich as Salesforce turns around and says, when you lived here in the Bay Area, we paid you X. Now that you've moved to Canada or moved to Mexico, we're going to pay you locally compatible wages. which cuts your compensation by a third, 2/3, and they don't hesitate to do that. Facebook does that. Salesforce does that with impunity. Not all companies dare, but these are the kinds of things you don't find out about on LinkedIn. Don't even find out about them on Glassdoor sometimes. You just have to live through it.
So in the past, you've mentioned other resources like focused on startups and things like that. Are those things still going on?
Are those things still going on?
Like there was a thing called Linked Up, for example.
I think LinkUp still exists. I haven't seen postings from them in a very, very long time, and I know they've not gone to spam. There are lots of engines that claim to find startup funded companies. I think the best of those is angel.io, which is for angel funded startups, but they very seldom.
What's that one?
Angel, ANGEL.io.
Huh.
They very, I beg them, literally, I have begged them several times to create a category for technical writing. They have a writing category, but it's mostly for content writing. Content writing pays a half of what tech writing does on a good day. And content writing is seriously at risk of being annihilated by ChatGPT and its ilk. Don't recommend people diversify into content writing unless they have a lot of subject matter expertise and can use that to their benefit. So angel.io does not post tech writing jobs as a category. And that's, well, so one of the things. But when I see posts from them that are tech writers, I jump because they've thought seriously about the need and their job is funded because they care about their reputation. Another way to do it is to go after the venture capitalists themselves. All the venture capitalists have portfolio sites, and you can search within those sites for technical writing opportunities, and gives you an understanding of, I mean, it's kind of like a mini job board because they consolidate all their portfolio companies' listings for you. So you know they're startups and you know they're funded by such and such a name, venture capitalist. Right now is a terrible time to do it because venture capitalist funding has dried up. But during the boom days, it was a fun way to pick and choose.
Andrew, can you repeat who that is? The sound cut out for a second.
Okay, so angel.io was the angel funded startup.
Right.
And there are dozens of venture capitalist websites where they list
sites. Okay, thank you.
Where they list their portfolio companies' opportunities.
I don't know, were you going to say something? You're speaking, but we can't hear you. Still can't hear you, even though you're not on mute. Oh, there you go.
Still can't hear.
We can't hear, sorry.
Technology.
Sometimes it's going to bite you.
So question.
Yeah.
Actually, for quite a few of the last years, I mostly got lazy and responded to hungry recruiters who contacted me, which gave me, let's say, mediocre results. But it was, in some sense, it was less frustrating than trying to hunt down real job openings. And I actually, I was just looking through my records and I can't quite figure out how I landed this particular job. I don't know whether it was a hungry recruiter or what happened, but I'm working for one of the largest IT consulting firms on the planet. How the hell they came up with me, I'm not sure, but
LinkedIn
yeah,
recruiter.
yeah, right. So far, so good, I guess. Um, I don't know. You mentioned primarily working for regular companies rather than agencies or staffing or organizations, consulting firms. Any thoughts there?
Oh, many, many, many. Okay, so you were contacted by a sourcing service that is affiliated with the mothership that actually did, house the opportunity. Um, these are typically low budget operations with a LinkedIn recruiter subscription and nimble fingers to find keywords that they detected in a client's job description, and that client job description might have only
Mm-hmm.
said, "We're looking for a tech writer." They call you, they befriend you, they beg you for the all important right to represent.
Of course.
Basically gives them an exclusive to represent you. It does not commit them to introducing you,
Of
and
course.
they won't actually tell you whether they so. Um,
Done
what
this dance a few times. Yeah.
what their job is to do is to twist your arm to get you to take a lower pay and to let them do the introductions for you on the off chance that they will succeed and that you will work. Um, Typically, it is very difficult to get a raise once you get a contract through one of these jobs because they
Not a contract.
okay.
Perm employee.
Salaried hiring through agencies is rare these days. Typically, it's done through the mothership itself and their in-house recruiters. If they no longer have in-house recruiters, I understand why
Yeah.
agencies exist.
Well,
But agencies,
TCS is a big operation,
oh yeah,
so
sure. Let me explain the finances for you.
yeah.
With a salaried position, typically a company has a recruiter agency has an agreement with the mothership, with the employer, Facebook, Google, Cisco, NVIDIA, you name it, to source and vet a candidate. And if that person gets hired, they get 20% of that person's base salary. They get that 20% of base salary typically within 90 days of your getting hired. And that placement is guaranteed for those 90 days. So, if you show up at work with an Uzi, you won't get paid.
Right,
If you
right.
show up on,
If I stay, if they get me on board and I stay, then they get their reward, and they probably get a percentage ongoing for some period of time, perhaps.
they don't get a percentage on going for a salaried hire.
Ah,
So one and done, guaranteed for 90, and then it's over. Basically, they can invoice and expect to get paid within net 35 or net 30 or net 45 days. Okay, contract, much more complicated. Contract basically begs you for the right to represent, negotiates an hourly rate before you've even seen the job description, and becomes your employer of record, as
right.
in your payrolling service.
Done that lots of times. Yes.
So in the employer of record world in California, they are required to pay you net 5, which means 5 days after you submit your time card. Many companies that are not familiar with California law don't do that. They say, we'll pay you when we get paid. That's not cool. That's illegal.
No, they can't do that here in California.
That's right. So beware. A lot of companies will try to do that because cash flow matters to them, and it's expensive to borrow money to pay you.
Yep.
They also have no obligation to coach you, to tell you what you could be earning.
Oh, right. Right.
to be your advocate once.
Oh, your staffing agency is nothing but a billing and collections organization.
Okay, you can call them pimps. It's okay.
Well, no, somebody like you probably offers a lot more service than that.
I do.
But most of these outfits are of very limited use. I've worked for a few that were pretty decent, and a lot of others that were much less so. Yeah.
So it's a sales-driven and underinformed business. I got into recruiting because too many recruiters called me when I was the jobs manager of the once upon a time San Francisco STC, and I knew people who were looking for work, and I knew their resumes, and recruiters would call me and say, "Do you know somebody who could do this work?" And I said, "Okay, I'll give you an answer, name, phone number, email address, but first I get to guess who your client is." And I would guess in one or two tries. And after they thanked me for the name and number, and before they signed off, they would say, "Oh, what is it? Could you just tell me what a tech writer does?" And I would explain to them what a tech writer does. And they'd call me back a week later, 10 days later, and they'd say, "Thanks very much. I just paid $20K for that name and number." And they hired them and they were thrilled. "Do that again. I got this other rec. Here's what we need. And oh, by the way, what is it a tech writer does?" And I said, "Okay, you don't care. You don't get it. You deserve competition." And I did that from tech writing and became a recruiter of tech writers.
Good for you.
And it has been, for the most part, 28 years. But it shows you the contempt with which most recruiters deserve to be held. They don't care. You are a commodity, and they are a pretty face and a pleasant voice, and not much between the ears. And if you share my opinion, just be aware.
Of all the organizations I worked for as a contractor, the one group that actually I would consider in higher esteem somewhat was Tech Systems, because the recruiter who worked with me, he'd actually come out and buy me lunch once a month, and we'd hang out and visit. And he got me a couple of jobs over a period of time, and so that worked out pretty well. But most of these others, nah, you come on board and you never hear from them again.
Right, probably because they moved companies or left the business. It's that kind of a business.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear you had positive rapport with
at least one of them.
No, just one. I don't take my candidates to lunch. I send them, thank you. I send them this at the end of the year.
This was after I had been on the contract. That one gig lasted a year and a half, 18 months.
So does anyone else have any sort of general questions before I stop the recording? And then we can keep talking after that.
I will.
Yeah, Andrew, how much a threat is AI to the tech writer? I can understand AI as far as maybe creative writing poetry or maybe a white paper. In fact, the Hollywood writers are now on strike because one of their concerns is AI taking away part of their jobs. But for tech writing, can AI write a manual? I mean, what
No, AI can't write a manual yet because it's not particularly good at evaluating all the relevant information that you need and organizing it, but it can extract from a huge data set, a large language model or LLM, and do a pretty good job. It's just that you don't know when it's making it up.
Right.
You don't know when it's hallucinating. And so you have to fact check everything you see and hear.
Especially if it's writing a manual for a machine, and then you try to, it tells you to do something that's dangerous.
It hasn't developed to the level of trustworthiness, but it's a really good first draft source. And a lot of people will be inspired by, the absence of a blank page. They say, well, that's wrong and that's right, but that's wrong. And I like the way they said that, and I hate the way they said that. Let me refine what the ChatGPT tool showed me and start with it. And you can actually ask really sophisticated, pointed questions and get accurate answers. But if you're vague, you'll get conjecture. And all these things are trained on World Wide Web, as of 2021. Last 2 years are just missing. So be aware of that too.
There are a lot of strategies for dealing with that aspect of it, but
there are. Constraining like the set is the best option, I think. Say point it at our doc set, docs.oracle.com.
Yeah,
and let it think.
Anyway, I recently heard a program that O'Reilly put on. They had Tim O'Reilly talking with relevant people from OpenAI and from Google, and then they had a bunch of other people talking, giving brief talks about the related subjects. I don't know if you can get the recordings. They probably have them available. But anyway, that was very interesting, and there are an awful lot of issues around this that we have to deal with as time goes by.
Yeah. It's potentially a threat and a serious one, especially if you are writing soft content. If it's technical and fact-based, it's not there yet, but it could be soon.
Well, I mean, a lot of what I do, and I imagine other tech writers do, is actually finding out the information, is interviewing people and extracting information from them. And I suppose you could teach chatbots to do that somehow, but mostly with the large language models, they're just taking existing stuff and learning from it and learning really the probabilities of what word follows which word, rather than actually what needs to be conveyed.
It's at one level it is that, and yet AI teaches itself, and it's getting more sophisticated by the day, to the point where even the experts don't understand how it learned what it learned. It was never programmed to do that. It just learned it on its own.
Mm-hmm.
That's scary.
It is scary. I mean, ultimately, it's a threat. It's a threat to our livelihoods. It's a threat to our existence. And I don't just mean professionally, but it's not going to go away. We live in a capitalistic world, regardless of which continent we're on, and people will use it to get an edge. And I don't think we have the self-discipline to shut it down. So it could be quite a ride.
And it's not just companies versus companies, it could be countries versus countries using it.
Yes.
Yeah.
All true. Anyway, if you want more Andrew opinions, I would love to see you take a look at my Quora threads. I have almost 80 replies on Quora about all sorts of creed related questions. I don't pull bunches. Not many people read them, but tech writers should know about it. Nobody's asked to pick my brains as broadly as Quora has. And
it had not occurred to me to look for you there, but I shall.
Cool. The link is on your screen. And if you want to book time, the TechCom talent at youcanbookme.com or youcanbookme.com. That's, you can book me, excuse me, you can book.me. That'll get you on my schedule if you want to talk.
All right.
Anyway,
Any other general questions before I stop the recording?
thank you for the opportunity.
Well,
Thank you.
it's been wonderful, and I am going to stop the recording now, but thank you very much.